They taught you to be liked, not to be powerful. But the day you stop needing approval, the same people who ignored you start copying you. Every weakness begins with a craving, and the most dangerous craving of all is approval. From childhood, we are taught to measure our worth through reactions. The smile of a parent, the praise of a teacher, the applause of a crowd, all of it builds a quiet addiction. It feels harmless at first, even motivating. You learn to please, to perform, to adapt, because being liked feels like being safe. But over time, the craving grows into dependence. You start doing things not because they are right, but because they will be seen. You start saying what others want to hear, not what you truly believe. Every nod becomes a small dose of emotional oxygen, and without it, you begin to doubt yourself. You start to chase that next approval hit the same way people chase attention on screens, compliments in conversation, or acceptance in relationships. It becomes invisible, automatic, almost instinctive. You change your tone, your words, even your silence. Just to keep the peace, you tell yourself it's kindness, it's diplomacy, it's maturity, but underneath, it's fear. Fear of being disliked, misunderstood, or judged. And that fear is what quietly rules your life. You stop living from principle and start living from perception. The truth is, the need for approval is not about connection, it's about control. You hand over the keys to your emotions to everyone you meet. A stranger's opinion can lift or break you. A small criticism can ruin your day. You tell yourself you're being sensitive, but what's really happening is dependence. You've built your self-worth on a foundation you don't own. When someone praises you, you rise. When someone doubts you, you fall. You live as a reflection, never as a source. The problem with seeking approval is that it never ends. The more you get, the more you need. The compliments that once felt powerful start to fade faster. The silence between them feels longer. You start to chase validation harder, working more, pleasing more, performing better, but no amount of applause ever fills the quiet that follows. That quiet is your real self calling for attention, but you keep ignoring it because the noise feels safer. You confuse validation with confidence, and the world rewards the illusion. People applaud the image of control while you privately depend on their applause to survive. Eventually, you begin to sense how hollow it all is. You notice that people's approval is fickle, shifting with trends, moods, and their own insecurities. One day you're admired, the next you're ignored. You realize that their praise says more about them than about you. That's when something inside you starts to break free. You begin to see that approval is not love, it's currency. And every time you chase it, you sell a piece of yourself. The moment you stop running after it, you start to reclaim your worth. Real confidence begins when you no longer need anyone's permission to exist as you are. It's when silence doesn't scare you and rejection doesn't shake you. It's when you can walk away from praise without feeling smaller. The addiction to approval ends the moment you decide that being understood is optional, but being authentic is not. That is when power begins to return to you. Approval is not a gift, it's a leash. When you live for validation, every choice you make has to be safe enough to please someone else. You start thinking before you act, not because you want to be wise, but because you want to be liked. You begin shaping your words to sound agreeable, your tone to seem humble, your image to appear harmless. You start living like a mirror, reflecting what others want to see instead of what you truly are. It feels polite, it feels social, but beneath it all, it's submission. You are no longer guided by principle but by perception, and perception is a fragile master. The invisible cage of approval is built quietly. It doesn't show bars or locks. It hides inside the moments you hesitate to speak the truth. It's in the pause before you disagree, the forced smile when you're uncomfortable, the nod when you want to say no. Each time you betray yourself to protect acceptance, the walls close in a little tighter. And the cruel part is that people rarely notice your imprisonment, because on the outside, it looks like you're doing everything right. You're polite, friendly, cooperative, agreeable. You blend in perfectly. But that blending is the very thing that erases you. Many people spend their whole lives inside this cage, believing it keeps them safe from rejection. They avoid conflict, stay neutral, stay pleasant, and call it peace. But peace that depends on approval is not peace, it's fear disguised as harmony. You become terrified of standing out, of being misread, of being disliked. You give others quiet control over your emotions. Every compliment feels like freedom. Every criticism feels like punishment. And so you work harder to please, not realizing you're only tightening the chain. The need for approval grows until it becomes your second heartbeat. You wake up thinking about how to stay accepted. You check faces, tones, replies, likes, messages, waiting for signs that you are still safe. When people are silent, your mind fills in the blanks with insecurity. You imagine you did something wrong. You start over, explaining, apologizing, adjusting. It's exhausting to live that way, but you call it being considerate. The truth is simpler and colder. You've traded freedom for comfort. You've mistaken obedience for peace. The worst part of the invisible cage is how it rewards you for staying inside. People will say you're easy to work with, humble, kind. You'll be praised for being adaptable, for avoiding drama. But that praise is a trap, because it keeps you dependent on it. The more you're rewarded for being agreeable, the less you dare to be real. You shrink yourself to fit their frame and you call it balance. You silence your instincts and call it maturity. Real freedom begins when you stop fearing disapproval. It's when you say what you mean even if it shakes the room. It's when you do what you believe is right even when no one claps. The moment you stop performing, you start existing. The leash falls off, the bars disappear, and the same people who once liked you for your compliance will start respecting you for your clarity. That is the paradox of freedom. You lose approval, but you gain yourself. Society tells you that being liked is the key to success, that if everyone approves of you, doors will open and life will run smoothly. You are told to be pleasant, agreeable, and easy to digest. You learn to smile even when you disagree, to soften your edges so no one feels threatened, to apologize for taking up space. At first it seems wise, even strategic, because people respond well to warmth. But beneath the surface, something darker begins to grow. You start to confuse being liked with being valuable. You start to mistake approval for respect. You start shaping yourself into whatever earns the most applause, and little by little, you fade into the background of your own life. The truth is, likability is a myth built to keep people tame. It rewards sameness, not strength. The ones who are most liked are rarely the ones who change anything. They are simply the easiest to accept. Likability asks you to be predictable, to stay within limits that never make others uncomfortable. But people do not admire predictability. They admire mystery. They admire confidence that doesn't bend to social pressure. They admire those who don't need to be liked, because that kind of independence feels like power. The human mind is drawn to what it can't fully understand. And when you stop explaining yourself, you become magnetic. Trying to be universally liked turns you into a performer. You learn the right words, the safe opinions, the controlled tone. You build a version of yourself designed to be inoffensive, and then wonder why no one sees your depth. You can't be remarkable while trying to be acceptable. The very effort to please everyone makes you invisible, because people remember the ones who make them feel something real, not the ones who blend in. When you live for likability, you trade authenticity for approval, and the world never respects that trade. Look at the people who truly influence others. They are not the most liked, they are the most certain. Their confidence creates polarization, and polarization creates gravity. Some people love them, others criticize them, but no one ignores them. They have an energy that comes from alignment, not performance. They don't shape themselves to fit the crowd, they shape the crowd by refusing to change. That's why they're remembered. They risk disapproval to protect truth, and that courage leaves an imprint that likability never can. You have to decide whether you want to be liked or respected, because you can rarely be both. Being liked means fitting in, but respect comes from standing apart. Likability fades the moment people find someone more convenient, but respect deepens each time you refuse to compromise your integrity. It's easy to please others, but it is hard to please yourself when you constantly betray what you believe just to stay comfortable. When you stop chasing likability, you start radiating something stronger. You stop explaining, stop adjusting, stop softening who you are. People might not always like you, but they will feel you. They will remember the weight of your presence. The goal is not to be liked by everyone, it's to be undeniable to yourself. When you can walk into a room fully certain of who you are, you stop needing to be liked, because you've already become something better. You've become respected. People who seek approval believe they are building connection, but what they are really building is dependence. The pleaser lives in constant anticipation, watching faces, tones, and moods like weather forecasts, trying to predict what will keep everyone calm. They think they are being kind, but what they are really doing is surrendering control. Every time they bend their truth to make someone comfortable, they lose a piece of themselves. The pleaser's smile hides exhaustion, because saying yes to everyone else means saying no to themselves. They think that being agreeable will protect them from rejection, but in reality, it guarantees invisibility. The problem with people-pleasing is that it feels noble. You convince yourself that keeping peace is a form of love, that sacrificing your needs is selflessness, that being liked is the same as being valued. You tell yourself that avoiding conflict is maturity, when it's actually fear in disguise. You start believing that the way to earn respect is to never disappoint anyone. But people who never disappoint others always end up disappointing themselves. The pleaser's life looks calm on the surface, but inside, it's full of quiet resentment. Approval seekers over-explain because they think understanding will bring acceptance. They over-deliver because they think perfection will protect them. They apologize for existing too loudly, for having boundaries, for wanting more. They lower their voice, shrink their desires, and mistake that shrinking for grace. But the truth is, the more they give, the less they are seen. When someone constantly tries to please, they become predictable, and predictability kills respect. You can't respect what you can control completely, and people, pleasers, make it too easy to be controlled. There's a painful irony in the pleaser's path. The more they try to make everyone happy, the more people take them for granted. The ones they work hardest to impress stop noticing their effort. The gratitude fades, the demands grow, and the pleaser keeps giving, believing that just one more kind gesture will finally be enough. But approval has no finish line. Once you train people to expect your constant yes, they stop seeing its value. They don't admire your effort, they assume it. And when you finally say no, they call you difficult, selfish, or changed. That's the moment you realize they never respected you. They just depended on your compliance. The collapse of the pleaser begins with exhaustion. One day you wake up and realize you are tired of being nice in rooms that never reciprocate. You notice how much you bend to make others comfortable while your own comfort is ignored. You realize you've spent years earning affection that disappears the second you stop performing. That's when the truth hits. You were never loved for who you are, only for how much of yourself you gave away. Freedom starts the moment you stop begging to be understood. When you stop explaining, stop defending, stop apologizing for having a spine, people's reactions reveal who they really are. The ones who stay are the ones who love your truth, not your obedience. The ones who leave were only loyal to your silence. Pleasing everyone is the fastest way to disappear, but pleasing yourself first is how you finally become visible. Because when you stop being the pleaser, you stop being the background of everyone else's story and start becoming the main character of your own. Power begins the day you no longer need applause to feel certain. When your self-approval is louder than the crowd's silence, something inside you changes. You stop looking outward for signs that you are enough. You stop measuring your worth through reactions, likes, or praise. The search for validation ends not because you've received it, but because you've realized you no longer need it. That shift is quiet, almost invisible at first, but everyone around you feels it. Your tone steadies, your movements slow, your eyes stop scanning for approval. You walk differently, not with arrogance, but with quiet certainty. Self-validation is not about pretending not to care. It's about understanding where your value truly lives. When you depend on others to confirm your worth, you become unstable, easily moved by every opinion, every silence, every glance. One compliment lifts you, one criticism breaks you. You swing between confidence and doubt because you've built your sense of self on things you can or control. But when your approval comes from within, you become untouchable. You may still hear the noise, but it no longer moves you. The noise becomes background music to your focus. There is a power in learning to clap for yourself when no one else does. Most people wait for recognition before they feel secure. They chase attention as proof that their effort matters. But self-validation flips the script. You work, you create, you improve, not for applause, but because it's who you are. You stop performing and start embodying. That's when true respect begins to find you, not because you demanded it, but because you no longer need it. People are drawn to those who seem complete on their own. Independence has its own gravity. The silence of self-validation can feel uncomfortable at first. When you stop chasing praise, the world grows quiet. No more instant feedback, no more reassuring nods. That silence is where most people give up, mistaking it for loneliness. But that silence is your test. It's the moment you find out if your confidence was ever real. If you can stand in the quiet and still believe in yourself, then you've crossed into strength few ever reach. The ones who can hold their power in silence are the ones who command it when they speak. When your approval is internal, the world adjusts around you. People start noticing your calm. They feel your presence before you say a word. They hesitate to interrupt you, not out of fear, but out of respect. Because the energy of someone who no longer seeks validation is rare. It's the energy of someone who owns themselves completely. You don't argue to be understood. You speak because you already are. You don't need to prove your worth, you move as though it's already proven. Eventually, your silence becomes statement enough. You no longer rush to respond, to explain, to convince. You understand that the world takes cues from your certainty. And when your self-belief stands unshaken, others start believing too. You've become your own validation, your own applause, your own proof. That is the silence where real power lives. Detachment is not indifference, it's control over your emotional economy. It's the ability to feel deeply without being ruled by what you feel. Most people think detachment means coldness, but it's not about shutting off emotion, it's about directing it. When you learn to hold yourself steady, no matter what happens around you, you become magnetic. You stop chasing attention. You stop over-explaining. You stop reacting to every tone or opinion. You start conserving energy, and that conservation becomes power. People can feel it when someone has stopped needing to be seen, because that kind of person becomes impossible to ignore. Detachment doesn't kill connection, it strengthens it. It removes desperation, and desperation is what makes most people unattractive. When you need something too badly, you push it away. When you can walk away from everything without anger or fear, you attract what others chase. The calm person in a storm always draws the most eyes. The one who can hold still while others panic creates the illusion of control. But it's more than illusion, it's discipline. That stillness becomes your signature. People begin to slow down around you, mirroring your tone, adjusting to your rhythm. That's how quiet control works. It doesn't demand attention, it earns it. When you stop trying to be understood, you start to be respected. The detached person doesn't argue to win. They don't prove, they demonstrate. Their calm becomes evidence of inner certainty. When you move slower, speak less, and act with finality, you show that you don't make decisions from impulse, but from intention. That's what people trust. You stop trying to convince anyone of your worth because you already know it. You stop needing to be chosen because you've already chosen yourself. That shift is magnetic because it's rare. Most people are loud about their value because they secretly doubt it, but the one who knows doesn't announce, they embody. Detachment is not about losing emotion, it's about mastering response. It's being able to see chaos without joining it. It's knowing that silence can achieve what noise never will. It's the art of letting things come and go without chasing either. When you reach that state, you start to notice how much control emotion used to have over you. Every opinion, every delay, every rejection used to stir you. Now it barely registers. That calm confuses people, and that confusion gives you leverage. People who can't move you start to fear losing your attention. That fear makes them respect you. The less you seek validation, the more validation seeks you. Power flows towards stillness because people crave what they can't easily affect. They're drawn to those who stay composed, who don't rush, who don't flinch. Detachment creates space, and in that space, curiosity grows. People wonder what you're thinking, what you're feeling, why you're not reacting. That wonder turns into attention, and attention turns into influence. The world rewards those who stay grounded when others drift. Detachment is not the absence of care, it's the presence of control. When you master it, you stop chasing outcomes and start shaping them. You stop needing energy from others because you've learned to generate your own. That calm becomes your magnet, your armor, and your power. Every no you receive is not rejection, it's refinement. The moment you start seeing rejection as something painful, you give it power. The moment you start seeing it as filtration, you gain control. Most people crumble under criticism because they believe it means they are not enough. They attach their worth to acceptance and treat rejection like proof of failure, but rejection is not the end, it's direction. It is life's way of removing what doesn't belong to you, even when you're too attached to let go yourself. Every no you receive is secretly saving your energy for the yes that actually matters. Rejection feels sharp because it hits the ego, not the truth. The ego wants comfort, recognition, applause. It wants to be chosen, even by the wrong people, because being overlooked feels unbearable. But growth begins when you learn to stand still in the sting and see what it is teaching you. The doors that close are not always punishment, they are protection. They redirect your focus away from where you don't fit, toward where you actually belong. The mistake most people make is chasing entry into rooms that were never meant for them. They beg for acceptance from people who lack the capacity to see their worth. And in doing so, they lose time, self-respect, and clarity. When you stop taking rejection personally, you start using it strategically. You begin to study patterns instead of emotions. You notice which environments drain you, which relationships blur your boundaries, which opportunities lower your standards. You start realizing that not being chosen is a form of liberation, not loss. Every no filters out those who can't match your depth, your pace, or your purpose. The world trims itself around those who refuse to chase approval. The more you detach from the need to belong everywhere, the faster you find the places where you truly matter. The strongest people are not the ones who are accepted by everyone, but the ones who are comfortable being misunderstood. They know that rejection refines character. It teaches resilience, patience, and independence. It forces you to validate yourself. It teaches you to create your own table instead of begging for a seat at someone else's ass. Once you understand that rejection is part of the process, you stop fearing it. You even start to welcome it, because every no means you are getting closer to a yes that actually aligns with who you are. Rejection is not a reflection of your weakness, it's evidence of your uniqueness. Not everyone will understand you, not everyone will recognize your value, and that's the point. You are not supposed to fit everywhere. The standard doesn't beg for entry, it forces the world to adapt. When you reach a level of clarity about who you are, you stop trying to prove it. You let others adjust or exit. The rooms that are right for you will never require you to shrink. Eventually, rejection loses its sting. It becomes information, not insult. You stop chasing doors that close because you realize your time is better spent building new ones. And when you do, the world starts to take notice, because the one who doesn't fear rejection is the one the world can't ignore. When you stop asking for permission, you begin to radiate authority. You no longer wait for someone to approve your ideas, your pace, or your choices. You no longer soften your words just to be accepted. Instead, you speak with quiet conviction, the kind that doesn't seek agreement, but naturally earns it. People can sense when someone has stopped looking for validation. It changes everything about how you move, how you speak, and how the room reacts to you. You stop explaining, you start declaring. You stop defending, you start deciding. And that shift turns you from someone who follows the tone of the room into someone who sets it. The aura of self-authority isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It's not built through domination or force, but through certainty. True authority is calm because it doesn't doubt itself. When you know who you are, you stop performing for others. You no longer need to convince anyone to take you seriously because your composure does it for you. You move slowly, deliberately, as if time bends around your choices. That calmness makes people trust you, even when you say little. They start to mirror your stillness, adjust their words, and match your energy without realizing it. This is the silent gravity of leadership. People who lack self-authority talk too much, explain too fast, and overprove their worth. They think control comes from expression, but in truth, it comes from restraint. The person who can sit in silence while others rush to fill it owns the conversation without saying a word. Authority is not about overpowering others, it's about anchoring yourself so deeply that no one else can pull you off balance. When you no longer seek to impress, you begin to impress naturally, because the world can feel when someone moves from intention instead of reaction. When you stop negotiating for respect, you start defining it. You no longer ask, "Is this okay?" You say, "This is what's happening." You no longer apologize for taking space, you occupy it with quiet confidence. The difference between arrogance and authority is intention. Arrogance demands recognition, authority assumes it. You don't need to prove your strength when your presence already communicates it. That's why people start competing for your approval instead of questioning your position. They sense that your standards are firm and that your boundaries are not open for debate. Self-authority isn't about controlling others, it's about mastering yourself. It is the discipline to move only when it matters and to remain still when it doesn't. It's knowing that your value isn't negotiable. The more you live from that certainty, the more magnetic you become. You draw opportunities, respect, and loyalty without chasing them. People follow what they can trust, and nothing feels more trustworthy than calm conviction. Eventually, your confidence becomes a language of its own. You don't argue, you don't rush, you don't explain. You make decisions that carry the weight of finality. That's when you cross from influence to dominance. The world begins to orbit your certainty, not because you forced it to, but because it naturally aligns around stability. Power doesn't shout, it resonates. And when you stop asking for permission, you become the permission itself. At the highest level, you stop chasing belonging because you become the measure of it. You stop waiting to be accepted, invited, or validated. You stop asking if you're enough, because that question no longer applies. You move through life with a quiet understanding that you don't need to prove yourself to anyone. The crowd that once judged you begins to study you. The same people who once questioned your choices now copy your tone, your pace, your calm. You've stopped trying to fit in, and in doing so, you've become the shape others try to match. Becoming the standard happens when approval loses its meaning. You've already tested what happens when you chase acceptance. You've seen how unstable it is, how quickly it disappears when you stop performing. You've realized that comparison is the enemy of individuality. When you measure yourself against others, you shrink to fit their scale. But when you measure yourself against your own growth, you rise beyond it. You start setting the tone, not reacting to it. You become your own compass, your own authority, your own definition of success. That's the shift that separates the powerful from the dependent. Most people live waiting for permission. They wait to speak, to act, to believe in themselves, until someone else tells them they're ready. But the ones who become the standard decide without validation. They don't ask if the world is ready for them. They move as if it already is. Their certainty makes others follow. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. When you are aligned with your truth, your presence commands more than any performance ever could. You stop trying to be relatable because relatability requires you to be common. And you were never meant to be common. When you become the standard, your silence carries more weight than other people's noise. You stop chasing opportunities that don't match your value. You stop explaining your choices to people who haven't earned your perspective. You move slower, but every move is deliberate. People start adjusting their tone when they speak to you. They mirror your calm. They follow your rhythm. They respect your boundaries. Without asking for it, you become the invisible authority in every room. That's what happens when your self-approval becomes the loudest energy in the space. The moment you stop needing to belong, you start to attract people who truly align with you. You no longer chase connection, you filter it. You no longer beg for loyalty, you inspire it. The same world that once doubted you begins to bend around your consistency. That's when you realize power isn't about being above others. It's about being rooted so deeply that no one can move you. You define the terms, you set the pace, and the world catches up. You've become the reference point, not because you demanded recognition, but because you stopped needing it. The people who once misunderstood you now look to you for direction. The ones who dismissed you now quote you. This is the quiet victory of becoming the standard. You didn't win by competing. You won by transcending the game. When you no longer seek approval, you stop chasing places that don't see your worth, because now you are the measure of worth itself. Maybe this video helped you see yourself or someone you know in a different way. Feel free to let us know via a like or in the comments. And if you want more wisdom and guidance in becoming a better version of yourself, subscribe now. This is the moment to start becoming the person you really want to be.